hit record, everyone. Let's see if that works. We might have a few more people joining us, so we'll wait just one more second. Okay, we'll go ahead and just get started. And then as people join us, they can. My name is Joelle Basnight, and I'm the superintendent at the American Community School Amman, Jordan. And I'm also a member of the GRC board. Really happy to be here to speak with you today. And while I'll be talking specifically about interviewing, I'm also happy to be a resource for you in general and answer any questions you might have. But we'll jump into behavioral situational interview questions. Let's see here if I can get this going. All right, our outcomes for today are to understand the what, why, how of these behavioral and situational interview questions, to anticipate what an interviewer may or may not want to hear when listening to an answer. And so to dive in, the old adage of past behavior predicts future behavior. I think I certainly, as a recruiter, believe this. I think more and more recruiters believe this, and it certainly does to a point. We know that everyone is on their absolute best behavior when you're in an interview, and that you're hopefully very well prepared. But nonetheless, we exclusively use behavioral and situational questions in all of our interviewing process because we feel like that helps us to get to know what the candidate's like. So, what is this? Well, essentially, the question would ask you to share a previous experience and what you may have learned from this experience. Because on the recruiting side, we would guess that your past experience would allow us to anticipate your future actions. And we'll look at some examples in a few moments. So, this would be a behavioral question. What about a situational question? Well, not dissimilarly, we might put a scenario in front of you and say, hypothetically, what would you do? And we know you don't know our school. That's fine. But you can't say, oh, it just depends, because then that's not really answering the question. So, what is a scenario question? You'll hear a scenario or situational question, and then we'll ask you to share your probable approach, knowing that you might not know the ins and outs of our institution, because we know that we are highlighting for you, and this is a little bit of a spoiler for you on the interviewee side of things. If we've chosen a scenario, then it's important to the school for one or two reasons. Either it's important because we want to find mission aligned people, and so we're really listening to how you would answer. Or it might be an issue that we're dealing with and we're hoping that you'll bring some expertise. Because when you talk about what you might do or what you have done in a similar situation, we can anticipate your future actions. So here are some things to keep in mind before we jump into some practice. These are not new approaches. Recruiters know all about this, and we also know that you can prepare and be coached. So many recruiters, myself included, use predefined look-fors. So we might write a question, and then we might have a number of bullet points that we use to then track your answers. And we oftentimes will track your answers without giving you any further prompting. So I just finished doing an elementary principal search, and I was debriefing with a couple of people who were not selected to go forward. And one of the gentlemen said, well, I noticed every time I would ask you, did that answer that question? No one said anything. And I was like, yeah, exactly, because we want to be fair and equitable across all candidates. And so the best candidates didn't need us to prompt that the question wasn't actually answered. So we're not going to prompt you. So that you might find that with different recruiters that they have a predefined look for and they don't give you any prompts. We're also listening for patterns in your behavior. If we see something on your resume or we hear something in a reference, and then we're having a conversation with you in an interview, we're trying to see that all of that is coherent. We might be drilling for specificity. We're listening for your learning about yourself, your own teaching practice, your own experience in a school. We're listening for your fit at our school and how much that might work out for both of us. We're listening for your desire to grow and to change because that's really important to us. And they're also really telling about the institution. So you'll see when we move into the practice that I'm offering you a couple examples of questions you might ask during that very important, what questions might you have for us now portion of any interview. Because when you ask questions and we answer, you want to listen carefully to our answers. And when we ask you questions, you can extrapolate a little bit about our school from the questions that we choose to ask you. So, because you know this, you may now want to brainstorm stories and examples to keep concrete and concise. So there's only kind of so many questions we can ask you. Of course, we can ask about your strengths, your areas of weakness, how you make decisions in the classroom. You want to have at your fingertips, and really it can be on the desk in front of you. We won't see it when you're talking to us online. Some really great examples, a couple of keywords that will jog your memory. Don't go into too much detail. Don't go on for too long. Keep them concrete and concise. But we want to hear real stories and examples because that's why we're asking you these behavioral and situational questions. You want to mobilize your network. You want to do all the sleuthing you can beforehand. Look at people's websites, talk to a friend of a friend of a friend. Be connected to people to find out what's really going on in that school because you want to be able to tailor your answers accordingly. You want to be true to yourself because fit matters both ways. It doesn't matter how much you hear about a school and how amazing it is. If it's not amazing for you, you will be miserable, and you don't want to go anyplace and be miserable. Make sure you breathe, pause before answering. You're welcome to say, I'd like to organize my thoughts for a moment, or I'd like to make notes. Could you put that question in the chat? I'd like to be able to refer to it. Any of that, even, that's a really good question. Any of those kind of delay tactics that allow you to have some breathing and thinking time are completely fine. Always be honest. Don't overextend yourself because we all check references. And if you sound too good to be true in your interview, we're going to ask a lot of questions from your reference, and you want your reference to back you up. And then ask behavioral and situational questions of your own. And you'll see some examples in a moment because you want to listen to what matters to you as a candidate. That's super, super important because this interview thing goes both ways. So for each of the examples that you're about to see on the screen, I invite you to go internal for a second and think, what would you guess the recruiter is hoping to hear? And what would you guess the recruiter is hoping not to hear? And then we'll unmute and you'll have an opportunity to share. So here is an example. You can see the directions are at the top of the screen again. Here's an example of a behavioral question. Tell me about a time that your work was criticized. What did you take away from that experience? So go internal for a second, and then you're welcome to unmute. You don't need to raise your hand. We're a small group. And just shout out, what do you think a school would hope to hear, and what would you hope they don't hope to hear? Over to you.
My first thoughts with this is how the individual gives and receives feedback and how they engage in more of a collaborative conversation about their practice.
Thank you. Yes, for sure. Anyone who tells me my work has never been criticized is probably not telling me the truth.
An opportunity for growth.
Absolutely, right? I mean, my school in particular, we're always listening for growth and vulnerability. That's really important to us in our community. And so you better believe that I'm listening for that for sure. What else? Anything else?
I was gonna say vulnerability, just as you said right now, like having that openness of it's okay to make mistakes. I've made them, and this is what I take from that. And hopefully like get some like be humbled from learning from your environment.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like I said, if you said nothing's been criticized, I would wonder. And if you gave me something like, oh, one time I didn't park in the right parking lot, I would also think that you perhaps are not grown up enough to say, I'm not fully formed as an educator, because none of us are fully formed as educators. It's a lifelong thing. So I would absolutely be listening for vulnerability and for honesty. So here is a situational question. You can't remember a student's name in class. What do you do? And how might you approach that situation in the next class? So go into Google for a moment, and then you can unmute and share what you think a school would want to hear and not want to hear.
So we actually just started this year, and I have 24 girls, and sometimes I can't remember my students' names yet. And so I always tell them, I don't know it yet. I'm working at it. And then I say, but I don't want you to tell me exactly what it is. I want you to tell me what it starts with. And then we kind of play with a guessing game of, okay, it starts with a C. I'm like, okay, I'm in Germany. It starts with a C. And I remember I have a Charlotte, so I try Charlotte, and they're like, no. I'm like, okay, not that. And I try one more time until we get to nope, she still doesn't know it. And then I say, what's your next one? And usually when I can get to 2 letters, I know what their name is. So I tell them, like, I will learn it. It's just taking me a minute. And the more you help me with guessing it, the more likely I'm to learn. Because frequently they'll just say it's Charlotte. And I'm like, that's not helping me learn. Please help me learn as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all have been there, especially living abroad, where sometimes you're exposed to names that are difficult to pronounce or really different from what you might be used to. And so having a plan, and I love that you use the word yet. I don't know your name yet, but it's important that I know your name because that's what a recruiter wants to know, that you're not going to say like, hey, sweeties, hi, darlings, hey, scholars, that you're going to use these general terms. I actually had someone in an interview tell me like, well, I make name tents and I put them up throughout the entire year because then I don't have to learn the person's name. And I mean, okay, that's honest, but like, is that a smart answer? I don't think so. What else comes to mind? Anyone?
So I,
Okay.
sorry.
Um,
I
who is
would
good?
say, oh, sorry. Am I am I good to go?
Go
Yes.
ahead, go ahead,
I
go
would
ahead.
say that question's maybe trying to figure out your approach in you say so the question says you can't remember like a singular student's name, right? So it's kind of maybe like how would you go about making that student not feel singled out, and how would you make them feel included if you couldn't remember that one particular student's name? So maybe having a more collective approach to kind of figuring out everyone's names. And so I'm a music teacher, and something I like to do when I start is do kind of percussive rhythm games, but break their names down into syllables. And that's really helped me to understand to know their names, but not only their first names, but I'm really good at remembering almost we use like first, middle, and last names as well. So to make really interesting rhythms. So I think like trying to sort of I don't know, trying to gamify it and do it in a way that maybe that they don't know that you've forgotten kind of thing. Like, you just keep kind of doing something at the beginning of a lesson that is just standard, and then eventually, it gets drilled in your head.
Yeah, you've personalized it to your area, like what it
Yeah.
is that you teach. So it feels very, by the way, I need two music teachers, just BTW. But nonetheless, you've personalized it to your classroom. And really, as a recruiter, I want to hear that you care about kids' dignity, right? That
Mhm.
you don't want anyone to feel like I don't care about you, that you have a plan, whatever that plan is. It could be a game like Danielle was talking about. It could be percussion, like you're saying, Harry. Whatever it might be, it's something that helps not only for you to learn, because we've all been there, but also preserves the dignity. And then it goes on to say, how would you approach this in the next class? And Harry has said, I build this into every single one of my classes because then it feels really natural and normal. Danielle has built that kind of guessing into her class. And so that's very anticipatory for a student, which would allow me to extrapolate, well, and now I know how Danielle and Harry will come to my school and how they'll interact with my students.
Absolutely. I think so. Just to end up on that, my current role, I teach across many different schools. So I teach maybe 350 children a week. So even students that I've been working with for maybe a year, I really struggle to remember sometimes, especially if they're not particularly bad or particularly engaged. So it's just something that I've had to kind of drill into every single lesson and make it relevant to the particular unit of learning. So if it's percussion, we do percussive things. If, if it's more like sort of melodic based, we'll do it around that instead. But yeah, definitely interesting.
Thanks for sharing. Was there somebody else who wanted to share?
I was just
Yes,
gonna, sorry, go ahead.
yes. Okay. So I teach ESL in China. So obviously, getting to know these kids' name is a challenge. So what I did, I made name cards for everyone. So I gave each of them an English name. Some children already have an English name, and what they do, they introduce themselves every time we have a class. My name is, say for example, my name is Sammy. My Chinese name is da 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 da, Wang Chao or something like that. My favorite thing is this, that, that. So by doing that every day, it's just for oral practice for them, which is why I'm there anyway. But in doing so, I get to know their names, and after a while, I don't have to rely on the English name. I now know the Chinese name, so I can reference them when I need them to do an activity or I need them to help somebody.
Thanks. And I can only I would assume that you're explaining that to students as well. To say like this is a way that it helps me to learn your Chinese name, because we all know that that identity is really important to kids.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I remember.
Yes, and they will, and I think doing so, it makes it easier for you to teach them. It builds confidence and, a sense of community in the classroom and not, I like trans language. Is
Mhm.
that the correct term? Yes. So you're not like, because you're teaching English, you now throw out the Chinese, like you try to incorporate it as much as possible. Yeah.
And pronunciation is a great opportunity for especially students who, I mean, I'm in the Arabic speaking world, but I used to also work in China. My previous school, we had 40% South Koreans. I mean, learning how to pronounce correctly and really being humble about you might be having a hard time saying XYZ English word. I have a really hard time saying your name. Can you say it again for me? Can I practice it? I always remember going to graduation practice at one point, and one of the kids said, "Oh no, it's not Park, it's Pack." And I was like, for all of these years, I have been saying Park, and you never corrected me. Like I feel horrible if it's Pack. I can say those words. Just tell me. And I think the more that we build that into our communities, the more we're telling kids, especially in an international context, you matter, your names matter. This is your identity, and we really respect that. Was there someone else who wanted to make a comment before we move on? Julie.
Just really quickly, because I also have really, really hard time remembering names. And now I'm an administrator, so I don't see, I see the whole school all the time. So for me, what I try to focus on is their positive behavior. Oh, thanks for holding the door, Juan, or, you know, any opportunity to address that person by name. And if I don't know their name, it's an opportunity for me as a leader who often sees students simply for discipline issues, for me to say, this is something I have a hard time with. Could you say your name for me again? And I want to remember that, so to just let them know that I'm a leader and I have to enforce these rules. And oftentimes you see me for discipline, but I'm also a learner, just like you.
Absolutely. That vulnerability. Thanks, Julie, for sharing that. So, what might you ask a recruiter in that last little bit of that question and answer? If you're interested in becoming a leader in the future, you might ask something like, developing teacher leadership is really important to me. How might you nurture a leader, nurture me as a leader if I joined your institution? So any recruiter should be able to answer that question. If they can't answer that question, and that's really important to you, that's not the institution that you want to join. Just as we're interviewing you, you're interviewing us. And so you need to think about, what would I want to hear? You may want to hear, we have formalized processes within our institution that helps you to nurture and develop as a leader. We have a leadership academy. We send people here or there. There are different, we tap people to lead all school initiatives, so on and so forth. Whatever it is, you want that recruiter to actually have a plan. So let's do some more. Here is, you won't choose a partner. We'll just do this as a whole group. Integrity and trust sometimes involves admitting our shortcomings or mistakes or doing something that is unpopular with others. Share a similar situation in which you found yourself. So a behavioral question, go internal for a moment, and when you're ready, share out what do you think someone would want to hear and what would they not want to hear?
My first thought with this would be how individuals are managing up with their administrative teams, how they're approaching complex problems with them about school, about structuring things like subbing or those kinds of issues that can be hot topics at an institution, and how they're approaching it collaboratively rather than aggressively, to try to gain like a clear end goal for everyone.
Mhm. So Daniel, you're looking at it as an opportunity to share how you might connect with people who might be in a different authority position than you, to either help coach them or help coach yourself. Did I get that right, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's kind of like that. It's a lot of times you're in situations where maybe the administrator has a lot of issues going on, and they just don't focus on this one thing that you're very passionate about. It comes up, let's say, in a group meeting, and then how are you able to facilitate a conversation around something you feel would benefit the school? Like, for example, if you're trying to pursue developing further social emotional learning curriculum within the institution or upskilling the well-being program, how are you facilitating that with your leaders and in a way where they don't feel like it's confrontational, but it feels more like it's collaborative?
Understood. So, yeah, I could see a time where someone might be sharing, I'm new to your school and I'm noticing X. And X is really important to me. And I'm wondering, are you also noticing X? How might I support with X or what have you? And if a school is asking you this question, what they're trying to say to you is, we want you to put in, we want you to collaborate and say something. And we also know we all don't have it figured out, right? We can have integrity. We can be trusting by admitting our own shortcomings as individuals or shortcomings that we might notice in the larger section or the larger school. And so by asking you to share a situation in which you found yourself that's similar to this, that's a way for me as a recruiter to anticipate, well, is Daniel going to come in here and see everything wrong with my institution and be super aggressive? Or is Daniel going to come in here and say, wow, I noticed this. And I just like, you're my boss and I want to bring this to your attention. Like, what do you think? Do you notice this? Am I missing something? And like, I used to work in India, and there's a lot that would happen in India that for newcomers didn't make a lot of sense, but there was always a reason. It always actually made sense when you took the time to think deeply about it. And so this was a really important question to me because I wanted people who were able to say, huh, I might be saying something that seems like, why did I go buy my sari blouse? And there were six people who sold it to me. But those are six people that are employed, and that's really important in India. And so like that opportunity to have that exchange in my context was really important. What else came up for people? Anything else you'd like to share here?
Yeah, I was thinking with the something that isn't popular with others. Like one example that I thought was um me as I'm a high school counselor, so speaking about certain practices for record keeping in counseling that were new to the school, then it was like an opportunity to learn both ways when I was working with my administrators and be like, okay, this is what I've learned as a counselor. This is the way that I've managed it before. And then I wonder if this is a good opportunity to come in with like the mission of the school, the goals, the strategies, and be like, considering that, the last school that I was in Thailand, considering that part of our strategic mission is student support, then keeping this kind of data can allow us to work on referrals better. So do you think we could maybe like get to a middle point with it? So it's kind of like my answer, but also a question to you, like coming in with like a bigger goal, is that something that will make sense, including it in this answer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an opportunity to highlight something that you might have done. And it's also an opportunity to be humble and to say, in my previous school, keeping track of referrals was really important. So I built a system that I'm happy to share with you about. And I would imagine you have a system of your own in your school. We both know how important that referral, documentation is. Could you tell me more about it? Then you've told your story, that you kind of went through something that maybe people didn't see a need for, but you saw the need, so you made it happen. But you've also made room for the fact that maybe that exact thing won't work in your new school.
Okay, thank you.
I was thinking that I'm coming from it again from a leadership perspective, and sometimes we have to introduce ideas that might not be very popular with the teachers. And so data often gets people on board because, for example, we've integrated a school-wide writing program, a K through 8. And so my idea was to then incorporate a school-wide poetry festival in line with the writing program. And of course, for teachers, that equates more work when they already have their plates full. So how do I, you know, get them on board? Because it's super popular, right? To suddenly say, hey, by the way, we're doing this big project. So the data has helped us, like looking at the test scores and everything. But then I also tied it to the culture, I tied it to something, and I've been at the school for a while, so that also helps. I think as a new person, if I were just coming to a school and I saw there's an issue, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to observe and maybe gather data to then support this and ask questions, before I roll in there and be like, hey, we need to change this because this is a problem. Because maybe it looks like a problem to me, but it actually isn't, kind of like what you were saying with the situation in India.
Thanks, Julie. Like textbook, great answer insofar as, I, as a new person, I hung back. I collected data. I put that data in front of people. I built social capital, which allowed me to take a risk and to ask people to just trust me on this journey and to do this thing that created extra work for them. That was a situation I was in where I had to make a decision about this poetry thing that was unpopular with others. And, I also just want to point out the fact that if I were to come into your institution new, I would follow a similar thing. I would need to hang back, I would need to study, and then I would need to gather data before moving forward. So it ends up with this dual answer. You're answering the question and you're having an opportunity to kind of further your candidacy. Any,
I
please.
So I don't know if this was shared. Perform a SWOT analysis is also a good way to kind of like, understanding, the shortcomings and also being able to address like, what are the strengths, what are weaknesses, what are the opportunities and threats. And those type of methods do help overcome, what is going on because I think I'm a future aspiring leader, so I think, those things, do help out, even though it's textbook in a way, they do help, show where we are and where we're going. And there's another book I read by Richie Sunak, Starting with the Why. And I think, when people understand the why, they're able to buy into what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and this question is asking you to unpack a time that maybe you used that SWOT analysis. So you would want to, or you started with why, that both of those signal to me what you would do in my school if you came in, and you want to be sure to illustrate it kind of in the past with something that you've done.
And I
I,
think
I was gonna get there, but I didn't know if I had time.
Thank you.
I think as well that kind of relates to the mistakes as well. Again, I don't know if we just mentioned this, but um, if you make, when you're talking about the mistakes you've made, if you can justify it with the reason why, and the ultimate goal was to better the culture in the school or better something, then and you understood it was a mistake, and here's how you went to kind of rectify that maybe. But if that why was in a good place,
Mhm.
um, I think that that's maybe what the recruiter is kind of wanting to hear maybe as well is another positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we would expect everyone to make mistakes, including ourselves. And the important thing is that you've learned from that mistake. It's made you a better leader or a better candidate or a better teacher. And you're carrying that learning forward with you. That's what's really important. So, in the interest of time, I'm going to move us on to our next one, which is a situation. You are on a difficult team. Your colleagues don't always follow through on agreements. How might you approach this situation as a team member? So go internal for a moment and then share what you think.
I think for me, it would, since we're all gathered for the purpose of student learning and making sure that students are um, receiving the best, I think I would first start by just identifying this is what I'm noticing, and this is the impact on student learning. Like this is how it might be impacting our students, and then just start a conversation around how can we seek to improve this because ultimately we all want to make sure that we're giving our students the best. We're making sure we're using our time in a way that efficiently organizes our thinking and gets to the heart of the matter. But I think centering students makes every conversation during these meetings, even the difficult conversations, a little more feasible.
Are you going by Ruth or Joyce? Ruth.
I'll go by Joyce.
Joyce. So as Joyce has shared, like that, what a great way to open this conversation with your team. We're all here because we love our students and whatever it might be. So what I now know about Joyce, sorry, I want to say Ruth and Joyce at the same time. Joyce is that she's really driven by what's good for students. And then that's important to me as a recruiter. So just in that little clause, I've learned a lot about what she values. What else comes up for people?
I was also thinking of saying, if agreements are happening all the time, I might take a step back and before getting angry or anything and say, okay, there might be something else happening on this team, that it's not just the work. And having the sensibility that people have lives and they might be going through something, and kind of assessing how I'm reacting to that, if my emotions are getting in the way and I'm also making things worse. Just kind of like starting with myself, and then sort of like this plus choices of, okay, the students are coming in first, so what's stopping us from getting to student support?
Thanks, Gabriella. And I would say if you received this question and you knew from the job advertisement that this was a school that either used adaptive schools or valued cognitive coaching, Gabriella talked about using a third point. Like we have agreements. That's an assumption that we all hold that doesn't always pan out to be true in the teams that we work with. So, if you're on a difficult team and you're talking about this, it could be, I find myself wondering, does this team have working agreements? And if not, that might be a really great place to start as we center students and we make sure that the work that we're doing together serves other people, because we know we all bring all the light we have to bring on any given day, and our life gets in the way. So sometimes those agreements provide a really important third point. And right there, you've gotten you're centering students, adaptive schools language. I'll own my stuff. I know people have lives outside of school. I'm presuming positive intention. I think we have working agreements that have us follow through all of these things as you sleuth, because you'll remember one of the first slides talked about wanting to mobilize your network and do your research. As you sleuth, you get to know what's really important to a school. So in our context, for example, all of our faculty take adaptive schools. So that third point, that working agreement would really resonate with us. And you would know that by looking at our website. All right. Here is another one that you might ask. Your school seems to value collaboration. What does a typical faculty meeting look like in terms of collaborative conversations? So again, a great way to ask a recruiter to really unpack what might appear in like a glossy advertisement. We value collaboration. That's like really easy to say, and it's another thing to do it. So you should be able to get a very clear answer to this question. In all faculty meetings, we start with an inclusion. We have an opportunity to connect with each other in community. We typically learn something together, and it's an opportunity for us to upskill each other and build collective intelligence through blah, blah, whatever it is. Something that is not, oh, thanks for that. Really, we just make announcements in faculty meetings. Well, those are not collaborative conversations. And yet we all know we've been to a lot of faculty meetings that are very stand and deliver. And that is not indicative of a collaborative school. So great thing to ask if that's important to you. That's not important to everyone. All right, we have about 8 minutes left, so I think we can do a little speed round here. Describe a time when it was important to maintain the quality of your classroom teaching in spite of significant changes on the job. What were the changes? How did you handle the situation? And what were the results? So go internal for a moment and then shout out what you think a recruiter would want to hear and what they might not want to hear.
They're looking for a very specific example here, like a very specific example of something that happened and then how you adapted to what occurred and how you reacted and collaborated to handle the situation. So I think this one specifics is extremely important to include.
Absolutely. And you'd be surprised how many people, whether it's out of nerves or not having a good example at their fingertips, will speak in generalities. And then that's not really answering the question. So you want to be sure that you're answering the question. Anything else come to mind for people?
I feel like the most obvious one would be the pandemic. During the pandemic, because I know that my teacher was greatly affected by that. As a music teacher, in certain times we couldn't use instruments, there was lack of resources left, right, and centre. So it's been really, how did you adapt and overcome, but provide that really great learning experience for your students, despite everything kind of falling down around you. And yeah, I think that it's kind of looking at that side of things really and thinking how you overcome those, because that was the most significant thing that I could think of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
COVID, it could be we had a bunch of snow days, we had to go virtual. It could be we're downsized. We know our faculty is being downsized, and that's put a lot of churn in our system. It's really emotional for people. And yet I know kids come first. And so this is what I did in my classroom. Anything like that, that is because it asks for a significant change, not that, all of a sudden you were teaching a new prep or what have you. All right, here's the next one. A student contacts you for clarification and guidance on an assignment. This becomes a pattern. What steps might you take with this student?
I think that one of the things that I would start with is maybe having an agenda and having the steps visible for not just that student, but for all of the students, so that they can refer back to. But if it's one student that it's constantly wanting that guidance, I might need to see if it's just not he or she needing the guidance. It could be something else that maybe having or the student is having problems in understanding what's being asked of them. So it would be, I would investigate further. And then together we could come up with a plan on what would help that person to be able to, to seek further guidance.
So you would highlight, I have scaffolds and systems in place to support students to have self-direction. And I acknowledge that sometimes students need a little extra help. So I would, of course, help this student. And if it became a pattern, that would indicate to me I really need to investigate what's going on for that person.
I also think it really depends on the grade level and the subject you teach. So like I teach both upper elementary and middle school, and you're going to approach it differently based on the grade level. So again, being specific to your role that you're interviewing for, I think is really what the school will be looking for, because I teach middle school, upper elementary, as I said, my husband teaches high school. We're all going to be hitting it at a different level, and each grade level will need a different level of support. So I think what the person interviewing is really looking for is, again, a specific example that addresses the job you are interviewing for.
Yeah, we all acknowledge that things change depending upon age appropriateness. And this would give you a nod if I asked you this question, that at our school, we value student self-direction, self-advocacy, self-regulation, and we see it as the teacher's role to help build that, knowing everybody comes at very different skill levels, even within each age range. So I think being very specific in both of these is highly important. So I want to be sure we might have time for questions, and I'll just pop this up here for a minute. Another question you might want to ask, if this is important to you, your website indicates that new initiatives have to be mission aligned. Share with me an initiative that was discarded or abandoned for that reason. So again, this is something that everyone should be able to answer for you. It's very easy to say that our strategic plan is mission aligned, but there's only so many things you can put on the plate. And so recruiters should be able to answer for you if their strategic plan says everything has to be mission aligned. What was it that either came out of alignment, was embedded, was put on a shelf temporarily, and why? So I see I'm just going to stop my share. We have about 2 minutes left for any open questions you might have before we're yanked out of this room. What comes to mind? Anything at all?
I'd like to ask one if that's okay. As a recruiter, I've heard a lot about the you can seem a bit so I feel like I have a lot of big ideas and things I'd like to implement in the school regarding school-wide music opportunities and things like that. But I feel I've been told as well that it can look a bit too much like you wouldn't fit in with that school and you wouldn't fit in with how things are currently done there. But like, is there a balance between what is the balance, if there is one, between a candidate who has these kind of big ideas and who sees things in a different way and has the drive and ambition to implement them, compared to maybe a candidate who or what the school wants, and maybe what the school wants is just kind of the status quo.
Yeah, I think that's where your research comes in
Mhm.
because I've hopefully, if you don't know someone at the school, you know someone who knows someone at that school, and you can then ask those questions on the side so that when you're in an interview, you can put your best foot forward. And then I think in that question and answer, if a question hasn't come up to you, like a question we would ask about music is we're looking to build our music program and we haven't cracked that nut. What comes to mind for you? Like that indicates to you that that's what we're looking for. And at the same time, if no question comes up, that's your opportunity to sort of ask, how do you balance people who come in with new ideas with really respecting the past?
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. What else? We have 103 seconds.
I had a question about have you seen digital resumes coming through? And if so, is that something that helps candidates stand out? Is that something you're seeing come about more, or what are your thoughts around digital video resumes, rather?
Really seen most of the resumes that I've seen have come from, a Canva or some sort of design software. I haven't really seen a lot of interactive or purely digital items as of yet.
I have a question regarding that because I've made mine really, really plain because I thought that schools were using ACS. Is it ATS? Sorry, ATS. Are they using that or should I be using Canva?
Oh, I think, you just don't want it to look like it came out of a typewriter in 1970. Like that I would avoid. But you also don't want something that's like whiz bang colorful because most of us recruiters are over 50 and we may print something. It's nice to print it in black and white. We want to be able to see your name, your contact details. We don't want to look at like font 8 and squint. So I think, you want to think about stuff like that. And any of your principals at your school should be willing to look at your resume and give you feedback. If not, send it to me. I will.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Super quick question before we are kicked out. Also have an online portfolio. Is it like, do recruiters look at that or not? I love keeping it, but is it useful?
I would probably only look at that with finalists. I wouldn't look at that initially. I might have 100 applicants for one position and I just don't
Yeah.
have time. But if I got down to 3, then I might look at it.